In 2019, the end of 2019, an independent laboratory called Valisure, and it has an interesting business model. What they would do is they would routinely test batches of medications that they had bought abroad to make sure they're safe before they sent them out to their clients, their pharmacy clients. And they were testing Zantac, a very common antacid, also known as ranitidine, which is the chemical ingredient within it. And they discovered that there was this like bonkers levels of something called NDMA, not to be confused with MDMA, the active ingredient in ecstasy, right? NDMA. And NDMA is this terrible molecule that was discovered in the 1930s when they were developing rocket fuel for the first time. It has literally no purpose in our society. It's kind of like this horrible chemical. And what it does is it's very small. It gets in the body and it causes adducts in DNA pretty aggressively. You have the double helix of the thing. It actually gets jammed in within it and it causes all sorts of DNA misfirings.
DNA damage.
Exactly. Genotoxicity, which then leads to mutations in cancer. And so it's been a known carcinogen for years, and they were finding large amounts of it. Anyway, long and the short of it is by April of 2020, the FDA had actually pulled it off the market because they discovered that this Zantac or the ranitidine molecule would actually fold in on itself and form into NDMA, that it had the component parts of it. Now, everyone always goes, well, hold on a second, Brent. I mean, this has been on the market since 1983. It's been on the market for 40 years. What do you mean they just discovered this in 2019? Well, here's the truth of it. GSK, the company that developed it, did the very test that they did in 2019 back in 1982, before it ever came on the market. And they saw the same thing. They saw the NDMA. And they went, well, that's not good. And so they said, well, that's probably not realistically an issue. And they didn't share it with the FDA. Again, they control what is seen. So they buried it. And
let me ask you, would the FDA have, was there enough known about NDMA at that point that the FDA,
100%.
That the FDA, assuming they were, on the up and up at that point in time, probably would have said, hey, this is a problem?
Yeah. It being a known carcinogen is something that has been known since the mid 70s, and it's been a known problem with certain medications. So this was actually the International Agency for Research on Cancer had been sort of developing special tests designed specifically to test for NDMA because they were concerned about it being such a problem. And so this was well known in the 80s. And it was well known that if the FDA saw that there was an issue with NDMA formation, that they probably wouldn't have approved it. So they buried it. And by 1987, came on the market in 83. By 87, Zantac was the best-selling drug in history, right? And it took to 2020 for us to finally get to the truth of it after how many hundreds of thousands of people were exposed to this NDMA without their knowledge. And so I represent people who have cancer, a lot of people, thousands and thousands of people of all sorts of cancers that we believe and will prove in court that their cancer was caused by their long-term use of Zantac because they were ingesting NDMA for decades and they got ravaged by it genetically.
It's so egregious and infuriating. But I'm not surprised because to me, like this information to me, it's like, oh, here's another one. I mean, look, if you watch television, like we talked about earlier, almost, not every, but many, let's just say this, many pharmaceutical drug ads tell you at the end of the advertisement that this drug may increase the risk of certain types of cancer. That's a very common statement. Sometimes it's even more specific, like may increase the risk of lymphomas or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
So they're telling you that many drugs on the market can increase your risk of cancer. Obviously, they didn't with Zantac. They didn't disclose it there, which is why they're in so much trouble.
Well, I think if they had disclosed the issue early on, I don't think it ever would have hit the market. I think the FDA would have said, no, we don't want this situation.
Because the NDMA is such a problem.
Yeah, and also there's plenty of other drugs in the space that don't have this problem that are just as effective. So there's no reason to approve something that has this greater risk when the risks effectively outweigh the benefits, right, of a new drug. So I think the FDA and that's why they pulled it off the market. When the FDA found out about it, they pulled it, right? They said, no more of this. And obviously they did it in their FDA way where they're, this isn't a big issue. Don't worry, it's safe, but just don't take this drug. That's kind
right.
All right.
Yeah. I read the headlines. I remember reading the headlines and thinking, boy, this is such a soft admission, right? It's like I was trying to get just like a hard statement about it. And I couldn't find one, but it was like, okay, they've pulled it for cancer concerns or whatever. It was the language was so nebulous and whatever. But obviously, actions speak louder than words, especially in this case. Thanks for watching. If you like what you just saw, why not subscribe? Here's a link to do that. And if you'd like to watch the full interview, you can find it at chrisbeatcancer.com. There's a link to it in the description right below this video.